Hello, and welcome to the Argyle HR Solutions Expos, live look at cutting edge tools. My name is Nick with Argyle, and it's great to have everyone joining us today. I have some important information to share with you, and then we will turn the floor over to our esteemed opening keynote speaker. First, we would like to take a moment to thank today's sponsors, Alight Solutions and GP. Our sponsors are committed to providing you with valuable content and a great overall experience. At any time during today's event, you can visit their virtual booths from the main agenda page, which include complimentary materials, information, and meet and greet opportunities. We also welcome you to stay socially connected during today's event. For those of you who are active on social media, please use the hashtag ArgyleDigital and follow us on X, formerly Twitter, at Argyle Exec Forum. Also, be sure to follow Argyle on LinkedIn for special announcements. I would like to take a moment to touch on our content neutrality policy, which we have curated based on the feedback we have received over the years from our members. We have worked closely with our speaking faculty to ensure that you receive a set of balanced and neutral viewpoints during the session today, and we appreciate our members' support of this policy. Finally, and most importantly, we want to hear from you. So during each session, we encourage you to submit your questions and comments in the Q&A box on your screen. Following each presentation, we have set aside time for our speakers to weigh in on your questions. Thank you again for joining us today. Now, let's get started. Without further ado, I would like to introduce Simon Kriss, Futurist, Innovator, and author. We are very excited to have Simon for his opening keynote presentation titled AI for HR, Automation, Hype, or Help. Welcome, Simon. Over to you.
Thanks, Nick. As Nick said, I'm Simon Kriss. I'm based in Melbourne, Australia. So yes, it is 3 a.m. for me. So you'll pardon me if I'm, not perfectly bright, but I'm going to do my best here. And we're going to talk about AI, which is a huge topic, huge in breadth and huge as in it's filling everybody's social media feeds, and try and demystify a few things. As we step into that, I know people love to take screenshots of slides and bits and pieces, and you're welcome to do that. You really are, but there's no need to. This whole deck will be shared with you later in PDF form. And a lot of what I'm talking about is in a book that I released about 6 months ago. So I am working on version 2 because 6 months is a long time in AI. And I'll talk later about, if you want to get a copy of the book, how you can go about doing that. So today, as I said, we're going to examine how AI is being used in the HR arena. And we're going to try and do this in 25 minutes, which is not a lot of time to talk about AI. So I'm going to be moving through fairly quickly. As Nick said, if you've got questions, please throw them in the Q&A box. I love to get some questions at the end, especially curly ones. So let's get started on this journey. And I'm going to kick off by giving you an absolute crash course, not that type of crash, but a crash course on AI, just so that you can understand it a little more. There's essentially two forms of AI. One is what we commonly refer to as traditional AI. It's been around since about the 1950s, actually, but it's really kind of come of age in the last 10 years. And that's about pattern recognition, understanding things and understanding patterns. So, the ability to understand human speech and find patterns in things. And then in the last couple of years, along came generative AI. And generative is different because not only does it understand from a pattern, but based on that pattern, it can create new things. And, everybody would have seen and played with ChatGPT that can create new words, create new stories, or software that creates new images. And they're the two forms of AI. And mostly today, I'm going to be talking about things that can be done using generative AI. All AI, whether it's traditional or generative, is essentially based on prediction. So what that means is that AI is very good at predicting the next best X, the next best outcome, the next best word, the next best part of an image. And it strings those together in context. So if we take the example of something like a chat GPT or a Perplexity or Poe that pumps out words, it's trying to predict the next best word. And I'll give you an example of how this might work. I want you in your head to complete this sentence. I love ice. What? I imagine a lot of you probably jump straight to cream. Everybody loves ice cream, and middle of the day, everyone's thinking about food. But you could have said, I like iced coffee. You could have also said, I like ice fishing, if you're Canadian or something. You could also say, I like ice skating. You could have said, I like ice hockey. You could have even gone to, I like ice in my whiskey. So how does the AI know which one of those words is the most appropriate? Well, it does that through context. It understands the context in which you use these words. And so if you were talking to it about being on an igloo or being out on a glacier, it probably wouldn't be talking to you about ice in your whiskey. It would know the context with which the words were being used. And that's its real power, because human intent is the key. And it's actually the hardest part about solving for AI is, what was the human intending? Once again, I'll give you a quick example. Imagine that you are talking to a new candidate, talking about their medical things, just typing, and all they type in is, I have HT. What do they mean by HT? Do they mean hypertension? Do they mean that they've got hypothyroidism? Or do they mean that they're undergoing hormone therapy? All of those are HTs. And so it becomes quite complex in how AI understands the context and therefore the human intent. All right, that was a very quick crash course. So kind of 7 minutes on AI. I could talk about it for the full 30, but I won't. What I want to do is I want to step into just a couple of use cases of how we're seeing AI being used today. And the first one, let's talk about this from the candidate experience. Seeing this being picked up a lot through screening processes, using AI to conduct screening. And this was initially done through a text-based chatbot where somebody would interact with a chatbot and answer questions, and it would try to score the answers. We're seeing that now evolving hugely into being able to use videos and being able to use other things. And we call that multimodal. So imagine that you have a system where somebody logs in and it says, I'm going to record this like a Zoom call. Please tell me an experience where you worked with a manager who wasn't a great line manager, or whatever it is that you want to ask in your pre-screening. Give me examples of your background, of your work, and it will record them. And it will not only understand the words that they're using, it will start to understand their facial recognition, their facial expressions, looking for signs of stress or anxiety or any of those types of things. Pardon me. And it will pick all of those up. And at the same time, it can use that data to not only test their literacy, their numeracy, but you might also want to take the words that they've said and the way in which they've phrased things and try to estimate their MBTI profile or their DISC profile or any of those things, all as a part of one exercise in an upfront screening process that doesn't necessarily have to have a human involved. Now, you may choose to still have a human in the loop. That is, somebody goes back and reviews all of the ones that didn't get through and why they didn't get through to see if they agree. Or you may wind up getting to where you totally trust. But in there is some risk, and we're going to talk about the risk. The beauty of doing this type of work is that it doesn't have to be done in English. The power of generative AI gives us the ability to do language translation in real time. So you could have a setup in London that is recruiting for the team in Paris or the team in Athens, and having those candidates do those interviews in that language, but yet a centralized team in London is then looking at all of the results because everything is translated in real time. So it's some pretty powerful software that we're seeing in that side. Another one where we're seeing these tools being used is what we call inverse interviews. So if you have people inside your organization that are looking to conduct an interview, perhaps for a promotion, how can we help those people practice for that interview? And there are multiple instances of doing this. If you would like to practice or have a look at this, simply go to your favorite generative AI engine, be that ChatGPT or Perplexity, and type in a prompt that says, you're an expert recruiter for whatever industry you're in. You're an expert recruiter for pharmacy workers. I want you to interview me for the job of pharmacy manager, and I want you to do that over 10 questions, and ask questions one at a time. And ChatGPT will act as an interviewer and start to ask you interview questions relating to that work. And trust me, when you try it out, you'll be amazed at just how accurate this can be. All right, let's look at another use case. One of the ones that I'm seeing again and again and again is a HR policy chatbot. It's a very, very simple start to AI in any organization. We all have masses of policy documents and procedural documents and things that we use to run our human resources across our organizations. What if we took those documents and put them into an internally facing chatbot, so it's relatively low risk, where staff could ask it in normal talk a question and get the answer back just from the policy documents, not something made up, but just from the policy documents. It's a really powerful use, and I'm seeing a number of organizations that I'm working with looking at this as one of their very first AI pieces of work. So in an interesting twist, I'm seeing HR often leading the way on being the first bit of AI that's dropped within an organization. All right. Let's talk about a little bit of operations efficiency, because we're almost halfway through, so I need to keep this moving. One of the big exciting things that I'm seeing AI do, because remember, it's very good at predicting and it's very good at patterns, is that we're starting to see software that is allowing for attrition prediction. That is incredibly important for those of you that are in industries with high staff turnover, those with high entry level roles. So hospitality, contact centers, things like that have a fairly high turnover. And there are companies that are doing this quite well. I was on a demonstration recently with Time Doctor, a company that does this, and they were saying that in the wild, they can get about a 70% prediction. If they are allowed to load all of the data points that they want to use, they can get their predictions into the 90s. So being 90% sure that someone is heading for attrition means that you can have their manager jump in, take action, save that attrition. So this is huge for people that are spending a lot of money turning over staff. Another big important one is just HR reporting. There's often high reporting levels needed, particularly to the CEO and to the board, around things like attrition levels around things like diversity and inclusion, or whatever it is that you're having to report on. And I'm not quite sure I understand why in 2024 HR managers are sitting in front of PowerPoint for 4 hours building a 20-slide deck that hardly anybody reads. Why wouldn't you have generative AI do that reporting for you? You say to AI, I want you to go and look at all of these systems, pull these data points out, and write me a summary. Now, you, of course, would probably want to review that before you hand it to your CEO. But if it has done 99% of the heavy lifting, then it makes your life a whole lot easier. A third use case under this area, as we kind of wrap up out of this part, is we're seeing the beginning of AI-powered, AI-driven training. So, instead of, if you think about your company having an incredibly strong knowledge base and that's covered by an AI tool, suddenly there's not a 4-week induction process. Suddenly that can be a 5-week induction process. And a lot of that can be led by AI. We have AI today that is teaching contact center agents how to take calls by playing the role of the customer, calling them and playing the role of the customer. We're seeing AI teaching people how to go about synthesizing drugs. We're seeing AI teaching a whole pile of things. And it really helps, particularly if you have remote workers. AI training can be very powerful. By the way, this is an AI generated image. That's why in the top corner, you'll see the prompt that I used and the tool that I used to do it. I always like to disclose when I'm using an AI image. So there really are endless possibilities about how AI can assist you in HR. But it would be unfair to talk about all of those possibilities without talking about some of the risks. And I want to touch on a couple of risks in particular, but the big one I want to talk about for HR is the risk around provenance and bias. So every AI model on the planet has bias in it. Why does it have bias? Because it was programmed by humans and trained by humans, and we all have bias. It's just that bias gets magnified. And I want to give you a couple of practical examples of bias. So she's a lovely young Asian student at MIT, and she used a system called Playground AI. I don't believe they're in business anymore, and asked it to make a professional LinkedIn profile photo out of her photo. On the right is what it did. It turned her into a Caucasian with blue eyes and changed her. So as far as this system was concerned, professional was not Asian. Which is just incredibly scary that happens. But it's not the only one. One of the biggest image generators out there today, there's two big ones, right? DALL-E from ChatGPT, and Midjourney is the other one. I went into Midjourney just recently. I only did this about a month ago, and asked it a very simple prompt. So it couldn't get too much wrong. Give me a color photo of a modern CEO, doctor, nurse, and housekeeper. All CEOs are male and for some reason interested in fire. All doctors are male, all nurses are female, all housekeepers are female and dressed like they're from the 1950s. But all of those 16 images are white people. And in fact, I won't bore you. I went through dancer and metal worker and a whole pile of truck driver, a whole pile of jobs to try and get the image to generate a person of color. The only way I could do it in the end was to ask for a basketball player or a rapper. And to try and get someone Hispanic, I had to go to gang member or farm worker. That is bias in a model, massive bias. And it does get worse. So you can ask some of these things to give you a black African doctor treating white patients, white children, and what you'll most often get is a white doctor treating black children because the model just doesn't have enough images. So this is bias. By the way, I did ask Midjourney yesterday, give me a picture of a modern human resource manager. This is what you look like. Orange sunglasses for some reason and whirling things behind your head, but you're not allowed to be female and you have to be white. So, if you're not a white male, sorry, you have to leave the job. And I'm only joking. The reason that I'm talking about bias, it really came to life in 2018 for Amazon, is that Amazon used 10 years of successful resumes to build, that is, people who submitted resumes and ultimately got a job, to build a profile to hire new people. The only problem was during that 10 years, most of the people that were hired were males. So the model learnt, don't hire a female. And it was only running for a few months before they realized no female candidates were getting through, and no candidates that were male but said things like, I coach the women's volleyball team, also didn't get through. And so they had to pull the chatbot down and stop the algorithm because it wasn't delivering. So we need to be really careful of bias. If you're going to choose a tool, make sure that they can tell you what bias is inherent in the system and how they're getting around that. The second one to be careful of is trolls. And I don't mean this type of troll, I mean internet trolls. If you are going to put a screening tool out there, people will try to fake their way through it, will try to do things. And I'll give you a great example. Here are 3 models, and I want you to guess which one of these is an AI model. Tina has 264,000 followers on Instagram. Miller has 136,000 on Instagram, and Emily has 242 on Instagram. So which one is the AI? If you chose Atina Lopez on the left, you're correct. But if you chose Miller or Emily, you're also correct. All 3 of these models are AI generated. They're not real people. And so it's quite easy to deep fake. All right, in our last couple of minutes, let's talk quickly about ethics and about responsibility. Ethics is a very gray area. What you think is ethical may not be what somebody else thinks is ethical. I'll give you 2 quick examples. The first one is a girl called Karen Marjorie. Karen is a huge Instagrammer, has a couple of million followers in the USA, and she launched Karen AI. Basically, I'll be your girlfriend for $1 a minute. And by the way, she made $70,000 in her first week and now makes about $1 million a month. But is that an ethical use for AI? Should you be charging someone to be your girlfriend? Well, on the surface, people will often say, no, that's not ethical. But what if you're a slightly socially inept male and you need a safe place to practice your skills of communicating with a female? Or what if you're high on the ADHD scale? The world is a big, scary, noisy place, and being able to chat with a friendly bot before you go out into the world calms you down. Now, is it ethical? And so you can see there's often 2 sides to ethics. That was a lot, and I want to leave time for questions, so I'm going to stop here. That was a lot that we kind of blasted through there. I do want you to remember that AI is empirical. That is, you can't study your way through it. You need to get your shoes off and get in the water with everybody else, get your feet wet. So get out there and start playing with some free online tools and seeing what it can do. So I'm going to sum this up in 3 points. You need to read, you need to learn, you need to explore and play with AI. You definitely need to define your first use case. How do you want to use it? But most importantly, start now. So with 5 minutes to go, 6 minutes to go, we're going to jump to questions. Nick, I'll let you tell me what questions we have, and I'll attempt to to give you short answers. And while I do that, I want to leave this slide up for people. If you are interested in buying the book, old school style from Amazon, there's a QR code on the left. Or if you just want to connect with me on LinkedIn, the QR code on the right, I'll send you a free copy via PDF and we can save some trees. But I'll leave those up there. Nick, questions?
Yeah, great, Simon. There's a bunch of questions. Here's the first one. Do you think
Mm-hmm.
using AI in HR helps or hinders company culture? Will we seem to be favoring non-human processes?
I don't think it hinders the whole idea of AI is it's not supposed to replace things. It's supposed to augment things. So the simplest example I can give is think of the movie Iron Man, where the character Tony Stark is still the superhero in his super suit. He's just helped along a whole lot by Jarvis, the AI, that does all of the donkey work, all of the basic work. So right now, even in things like candidate screening, I see companies that are getting flooded with resumes, and there are people that don't get an answer to their submission for 3 weeks and have no idea what's going on. We can shorten that and change that experience to get to the people straight away. So I don't believe it needs to change your culture. I think you need to import your culture into how you use AI. So that comes down to the instructions or it. I want you to be very businessy and very, wearing a suit and a tie and be quite structured, like someone might think about British Airways. Or you can say, I want you to be laid back, fun, engaging, like someone might think about Virgin Atlantic. So I absolutely think you can bring your culture in.
Great. Here's another question. The bias with AI is very concerning. How
Yes,
can you actually trust it?
you can trust it. What I strongly encourage is that if you're going to buy an AI powered system from a company, or you're going to use a publicly available model, that you ask to see the system card. That's what they're commonly referred to. A system card gives you a detailed explanation of what that model was trained on, what data was it trained on, who trained it, when was it trained, how big was that data set, what was in that data set, and should openly talk about known bias. And therefore, you can work around that or compensate for that. So if you know that there is a bias against Hispanic people, you can ask it to index its results in a certain way to compensate for that bias. And sometimes bias, just because a system has bias, doesn't mean that it plays a part. So if you have a system that is biased against females, but it's only serving up HR policy outlines without even identifying who the user is, then the bias doesn't matter. But if you then use that same model to make a decision as to whether or not you should promote somebody, then you have a problem. So it's about bias versus the use case and making sure that you're aware of it and compensating for it.
Okay, great. And I think we have time for one more question. Here's one from the audience. Is there one fail-safe way to determine if a picture is AI?
No, no, there's not. Unfortunately, it until very recently there was, and it's that AI struggles to draw hands, fingers. And it's still in a lot of images. If you look at the fingers and they're not right, even the cover of my book that's on screen, her left and right hands aren't quite right. They're too big. And it struggled to do hands. The latest version of Midjourney, version 6 that just came out, is a lot better at it. But that's about the only way to tell if it's fake, but it's very difficult to tell fake from reality, as we just saw with Taylor Swift over the weekend and all those deep faked images.
All right, great. Well, thank you again, Simon, for an excellent keynote. And I want to thank everyone else for joining us today. This session, along with all of today's content, will be available on demand following the event.